So now that we've covered external and internal motivations for goal setting, let's talk about a few mental blocks that get in the way of those goals. The first mental block is going to be limited beliefs. The second mental block are going to be the stories and the interpretations we tell ourselves. And the third mental block are the voices that go on in our head. The first mental block we'll cover are limiting beliefs. Limiting beliefs are external in that they are things outside of our control. Some examples of limiting beliefs are our height, how tall or short we are, or maybe the weather, how hot or cold it feels outside. Even our skin might be too wet or too dry. These are things that we have no say over at the end of the day. And so it can result in this sense of helplessness, and we make excuses for things that we can't change. As a result, we limit our performance, both physically and mentally. But one way to combat these limiting beliefs is to focus on the things that we can change in the moment. For instance, we might not be able to change our height, but we can change the beta and the movement that we're using for a problem. We can decide that we're going to figure out our own way to do a climb instead of blaming something outside of ourselves. The second mental block that we'll go over are the stories and the interpretations that we tell ourselves in the moment. And it really boils down to the expectations that we set for ourselves ahead of time. For instance, if you worked on a climb and you got a high point, you are probably really excited about it and expecting to reach that same high point the next time you get on that climb. But let's say that you don't reach that high point and you actually get worse in that session. What does that say about the expectations you set for yourself? You might be thinking, I should have done that move. I should have sent the climb. I should have done this. I should have done that. But ask yourself, should you have? Does that really ring true for you in that moment? Or is there a different way that you can look at the situation? Ultimately, progress is not linear. We would love to expect ourselves to just keep getting better as long as we put in the work and the time and the practice. But the reality is, with every high expectation we set for ourselves, there will also be a certain level of failure that we'll experience. And accepting that failure is part of accepting and acknowledging the expectations we're setting and the limitations that those expectations allow for. The interpretations that we tell ourselves can either hold us back or move us forward, depending on the perspective that we choose from the beginning. By choosing the perspective that we want to take, and by choosing the interpretation of the situation, we empower ourselves to move ourselves forward in a way that benefits us in the long run. This brings us to our third mental block, which are the voices and the dialogue that goes on in our head. Now, I'm sure at some point you found yourself maybe talking to yourself, whether you're in the kitchen or you're going about your daily life, or you're at the crag and you're training. There's some type of dialogue or voices going on in your head. Now, for the purposes of this course, we're going to talk about 3 specific voices that both hold us back and move us forward. The first voice that we'll focus on is what I like to call the gremlin voice. And the gremlin voice is the voice that really doubts everything that we set out to do. The gremlin voice says, you're not strong enough. You're not tall enough. You're not smart enough to figure out this climb. Why would you even go out to your project today? It's way too hot. You ate a really big burrito for breakfast. You're not feeling too good. Just don't even try. The gremlin voice wants to keep us safe and small and stagnant. Meanwhile, the second voice is the champion voice. And the champion voice aims to pump us up and raise the confidence and celebrate the accomplishments that we set out to achieve. For instance, if you send a big project or you did a move that you couldn't do before, The champion voice says, yes, you've done this thing, you've accomplished this goal. Therefore, you're a good person, you're strong enough, you are good enough in this one area. But the champion voice relies heavily on the outcome and the results. So therefore, if you don't achieve your goal, if you don't send that problem, or if you don't do that move, then the gremlin voice comes in and makes up for what the champion voice has failed to do, for what you have failed to do. So while the gremlin voice holds us back, the champion voice supports us and motivates us to move forward. Now, the third voice is the most important voice of all, and that is the observer. The observer is able to step back from both the gremlin and the champion in a completely objective and non-judgmental way. And the objectivity is the most important aspect of the observer voice. The observer is able to look at both the gremlin and the champion and say, it's really interesting that you're experiencing this. It's really interesting that you're feeling sad and bummed out and like a failure because you haven't achieved this goal that you set out to achieve. Or it's really interesting that you're standing on top of your project and you are celebrating yourself and you're so excited because you did this goal and you did this project and therefore you're a good climber. The role of the observer is not to pass judgment on either the gremlin or the champion. It's simply to observe what's happening in that moment while also looking at the bigger picture. And the big picture is what the observer really digs into. The observer is to look at you and say, this is what's happening to you in this present moment. These are the experiences you're having. These are the feelings you're having. And this is also what's happening to your body. So the observer is that connection between your mind and your body. What's going on with your eyes? What's going on with your chest? What's going on with your breathing or your legs? The observer connects your mind and your body in a way that simply observes and notices what's happening instead of labeling it as good or bad. As you move through this course and the next time you're going out to your project, take some time to notice the voices that are going on in your head. Notice when you're down on yourself and when you start to doubt your abilities and your strength. And also notice when you feel really accomplished and when you're psyched and happy on what you've achieved. Both of these voices, the gremlin and the champion, are results-oriented. So keep that in mind. And as you notice these voices, make sure to take a step back and dig into the position of the observer. Personally, I like to use the word interesting when I think about these voices. It's just really interesting. It's neither positive nor negative. It's neither good nor bad. It's just really interesting that you are experiencing these thoughts and emotions in that moment. And then ask yourself, what is the bigger picture that you might be experiencing as well? When you are feeling successful and accomplished, what could that mean? And what could those motivations be? Are they internal? Are they external? And the same questions go for when you're failing and you're really hard on yourself. And the gremlin voice comes in and tells you that you're just not going to do it that day or you're not strong enough. What is that bigger picture? And why is that happening to you? It's worth getting familiar with the gremlin, the champion, and the observer voice so that you can better understand yourself. Another topic that I think is really important to recognize is the vocabulary we use when we talk about the goals we want to achieve. If you say that you have to do something in that, I have to go out and train today, or I have to go on this run so that I can feel good about myself, or I have to do this or that. Noticing when we're saying have to, as opposed to saying I want to, like I want to go out and train because it's going to put me one step closer to my goal, or I want to go reward myself for the training that I already have done because I worked really hard at it. Noticing the vocabulary differences is important because it reflects the mindset that we're coming from. When we say that we have to do something, It's operating from a scarcity mindset, meaning that you have to do something because if you don't do that thing, you're going to lose on whatever it is you're missing out on. But if you want to do something, that's coming from an abundance mindset, in that you want to do something because you have so much to gain and so much progress to make in pursuit of your goal. When you recognize these really small word choices in your everyday speech, you might notice that coming from a scarcity mindset is a lot more difficult than coming from an abundance mindset. When you want to do something, that's going to be a more sustainable motivation than feeling like you have to do something just because you're forced to.